Since before recorded history, the people of Britain have had first-hand experience of the strange and unusual. Spirits who haunt ancient castles, stories of werewolves and banshees roaming the countryside, and fantastic creatures like gnomes, fairies and pixies. All are firmly embedded in our native folklore. This cultural experience makes us uniquely qualified to research these types of phenomena and help us find the truth of the reality that surrounds us. So sit back and relax as your hosts, Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, take you on a journey through this strange realm and together help us find the answers to the mysteries that lie just beyond our grasp. Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio.
This is the Paranormal UK Radio show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Irene Allen Block, and again, as usual, as always, forever and ever, I am with Mark Johnson.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Now, before we start, Mark, I'd like to give a call out to somebody. So, I'm not quite sure now. Hang on, Vibo, was it? Vissel, Vento? Oh, Vitus or Vitus or
yes,
Vitus or
Vitus.
33.
Vitus 33.
Yeah. Who loves you, baby? We love you, baby.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. No one else will love that baby.
No.
No.
Nope. So,
okay, that's him. Over and done with. Right.
So how are you tonight?
I'm just asking you the same thing. How are you?
I am peachy.
Peachy. That's good. That's good. I've got some strawberries here and plums and some passion fruit. So I should have cut up a peach, shouldn't I? I should have really cut up a peach. You know, I like to eat fruit while we're doing this. It's about the only time of day I get the chance to eat fruit, and now I'm waffling on. So what would you want to speak about, Mark? You said something about the television the other day.
Yeah, actually, just wanted to mention there's some news going around that Nick Groff, formerly of Ghost Adventures, he had two shows that were on Destination America over here, and one of them actually was premiered over there in the UK, which was Paranormal Lockdown, and he was just summarily fired from both shows.
Fired? Completely fired?
Well, they canceled.
Dismissed?
They canceled Paranormal Lockdown outright. And his other show that he had, Ghosts of Shepherdstown, they kicked him off, and they're just recasting the whole show.
Well, I don't know this Shepherdstown one, but Paranormal Lockdown, that was pretty popular, wasn't it?
It was fairly popular, but we're not sure what's happening. As usual, he isn't giving any information, which I suspect he's under strict non-disclosure agreements, which, you know, if he says anything disparaging, they'll come after him full force with attorneys. That's what these TV production companies do, you know, and it just serves as a word of warning for all you people out there who desperately want to get on your own paranormal investigation show and get on TV. It's not what it's all cracked up to be. When you're dealing with broadcast television or cable, you're dealing with pin-headed Hollywood suits who dictate to you what you can and can't do. They'll make you fake things, and if you don't do what they say, they'll sue you. So you don't get paid very well, and they expect you to run all over the place. And in the end, it's not worth the time and effort. And the only reason I say that is because I've been on a couple of shows as a guest, and I know people who are on the other shows. And I won't name names because they've gotten into enough trouble from these networks out suing them when they come up and expose the truth of it.
Yeah, I've been on shows as well, and you're right, it's not worth the trouble. But people want to get on these shows, Mark, because they want the fame, the glory, they want to be recognised. I think it's more that sometimes than the money involved, because there is no money. We all know there's no money, not really.
There's never any money in this business. Nobody makes any money. The only money these people make is when they tour the paranormal conventions and they do guest appearances, and then people show up and they pay to sign autographs, and they make their money on the side because they're certainly not getting paid on these shows. I know a couple of people who went bankrupt because of these shows. They screwed around with their paychecks. It was just a horrible experience. And again. And you can't say anything about it because you signed that little piece of paper. Yep. Yeah. So I feel really bad.
There are ways of getting stuff out there. And let's face it, everybody knows that, well, somebody said that they've been sacked. He's been sacked.
Well, he made an announcement.
Getting it out there.
Yeah, he made an announcement that the show was canceled and he's moved on. And then his co-star on Paranormal Lockdown, Katrina Widman, she used to be on Paranormal State, and unfortunately she wasn't there when I was on the one episode that they faked everything and whatever. But she was with Nick Groff on Paranormal Lockdown. And it was announced the other day that she's got a brand new show coming out with, of all people, Jack Osborne.
Oh.
Doing another paranormal show. Now, Jack had his show on Sci-Fi Channel, which was Haunted Highways, which was... Yeah. No offense to Jack. I'm not complaining to Jack because I actually liked Jack.
Well, you liked him.
I liked Jack, yeah. But, they ripped off my Paranormal Highways show on YouTube, and when they interviewed me, the producers tried to get me to change my story, and I wouldn't do it, so they cut me from the episode.
Well, that just goes to show, doesn't it? Can you hear me all right? Because I've got a very bad throat.
Oh, yes, we hear you fine.
My throat, it feels okay, but it's just not working properly.
Oh.
I don't know whether it's not dry or anything, but my voice is not right. I don't know why it's not right.
Anything like over here could be the weather.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you still got snow?
We're getting snow tomorrow. Snow and ice. We're getting into that like we had last March, where we just kept getting dumped on every other day with snow and ice.
Well, it's been pretty cold here today, but we'll be wearing bikinis by the weekend, apparently. So that's good.
Oh, that must be nice.
Yeah. I'm getting ready for it. I'm walking around in my flip-flops. You've got to practice, haven't you, before you start getting down to the nitty-gritty sort of thing.
Certainly.
So, yeah. So it's been freezing cold, and there are my feet bare in flip-flops. Never mind. I am losing my voice.
Okay.
I don't know what's happening here. I really don't.
Well, let's go ahead and get right into the show. We have a great guest tonight, a gentleman who's not only been on our show before, but is also a co-host on his own show, which airs here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Twin Souls.
Our network.
Yep, Twin Souls, which airs monthly on our network. And so we want to welcome Philip Kinsella on the program. How are you tonight, Philip?
Hi, yes, I'm very well, and lovely to speak to Irene, the lovely Irene, and the wonderful Mark. Lovely to be on your show again. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I tell you what, I've missed you, darling. I do listen to the show when it comes through, before it gets aired. But I just miss actually talking to you two, and Ronnie.
Bless your hearts. Yeah, it's been a long time, and I really look forward to it.
Yeah. We need more one-on-one interaction here, but anyway, we wanted to talk with you. I know you've had your books that you've had worked on coming out earlier this year, A Passage Through Eternity, The Enigma of the Dead, UFO, and Aliens. And then you're working on a new book, correct?
Yes, that's right. I'm working on one. I'm halfway through one called Guardians of the Dead. It's slightly different from the UFO book. And then I'm going to be working on a new UFO book called You the Public Deceived later this year. But with regards to A Passage Through Eternity, that came out last year. It only feels like it came out yesterday, to be honest with you. And that explores more of the theoretical model that I'd kind of like formulated with regards to the abduction phenomena. And just recently, I've come up with a few more parts to that intricate puzzle with regards to the abduction, because of the experience I had back in one of the experiences I had back in 1989, which I assume was the only abduction that I had. There may have been another one, but there's no way of proving that. But I wanted to explore the aspect of what the abduction was and how these so-called greys are able to operate by performing this task of, taking people through walls and doors. So a lot of the Passage to Eternity, the Enigma of the Dead, UFOs and Aliens, was exploring also the psychic realm, because I've always stated that there must be a connection on a deeper level of the soul. It's not just spacemen coming to kidnap us and experiment on us. There's a very important element behind the abduction phenomena, the reproductive program that the Greys seem to be very interested in, and also the way that they, make the individual forget the memory, the experience itself. So I wanted to explore this a little bit more in A Passage Through Eternity. And of course, I'm working on Guardians of the Dead, which explores more of the psychic realm, before I'm working on the bigger book, which I'll be working on later this year, You the Public Deceived, The Grand UFO Deception.
Okay. Philip, can you just explain a little bit about your experience, your first experience, so that the listeners can understand what
it's
we're
been a
going
while
on
since
about?
we had you on talking about it, so you might as well, let's
sure.
recap it, because there's a lot of aspects of it I don't remember either, and I'd like to hear more about it.
Certainly, I can remember it as though it happened yesterday. I mean, it was in the winter of 1989. My twin brother and I used to work in Bedford, and we had come back from home on the train from Bedford to the Bletchley line. Now, that train would come off at Millbrook, and it normally took us about an hour to walk home into the village. And we lived in a very small cul-de-sac in the village of Marston Mortain. And on entering the house, which we normally did, my mum was out at work. We had quite a big house there in a corner, so it was quite secluded. And I'd gone through the hall and into the kitchen, and my brother had come into the kitchen, which led out to the conservatory. But the kitchen had a back end to it, so that when you came in through the kitchen, you kind of like disappeared round the back. So when I came into the house, a coffee or drink was being made. My sister was to my far left. My brother was in the corner where there's a table, and our dog Benji was sitting in front of the breakfast table, so that the kitchen door is open, looking out to the hall that we just come through. And the hall had frosted glass windows with the front door, and we had a drive there. And so I'm standing there, and I remembered distinctly that the atmosphere in the house started to change. It became a little bit electric, or the only way I can explain it was like staticky. And I remembered there was a strange feeling of something going to happen. Now, something did happen that I'm still to this day trying to work out what that was. My brother went into a trance, and his face turned up to the ceiling. And when I saw a film called Dark Skies recently, I think it was called, one of the persons did the same thing, and it kind of like reminded me of that. My brother looked up to the ceiling and said, "There's going to be an earthquake, or Grandma's going to die." Well, I couldn't make sense of what he was talking about. And all along, this strange variation in the atmosphere was getting higher. And the dog, our dog, started to growl and then started to bark. And my attention was focused to a light that suddenly appeared to the front of the house. I thought, first of all, a car was coming up the drive. But of course, the only persons that drove the car was my mum, and she wasn't back from work. What happened was that the light started to grow very intense, very bright, and the frosted glass doors to the house looked like it was something from one of those cartoons where it started wobbling or moving or becoming translucent. And incredibly, this small being, about 3 foot tall, all clad in black, with what I thought was a motorcycle helmet on its head, but I later learned must have been some kind of visor or head instrument, had walked through the glass of the doors. It literally walked through and then ran into our downstairs bedroom and study, because my brother and I had a very large downstairs bedroom and study with shower room downstairs. Well, at that moment, the dog was going absolutely mad. My brother had come out of his trance. My sister to my left looked shocked. And I froze. My whole mind froze, because what I just registered did not comply with anything that I could register as being normal. So I reached behind me in the drawer and took out a knife, and I said, "There's an intruder in the house." And then I shouted, "There's an intruder in the house." And then all of a sudden, this small being ran from the downstairs bedroom stroke study across the hall and up the stairs, and the dog was going mad. At this point, I felt like I was going mad. We checked the house. There was no one. There was nothing.
Philip, I know you saw it. Did your sister actually see it? And
no, she saw the light. No, she saw the light because she was standing to my left, my far left. I can't draw the map. I can't draw the place out for you to see, because I think people would understand. But my brother was in the corner where he'd gone into this trance. So they hadn't seen the being. I and the dog, evidently, I know I was crucified on television because the dog was involved. But we checked round the house and there was nothing. And incidentally, I will tell you that our dog, Benji, had died not long after of a brain tumour. We can't say it's related. We can't. Anyway, that particular night, something even more incredible happened to me, because television tried to separate it into two parts. And I know that Kenneth John Parsons from Beams investigated this, and I know that we had a call from Jenny Randalls because I contacted her because I wanted to find out whether or not anyone else had had these experiences. Well, anyway, the next episode was even more traumatic and more unbelievable. And as I said, what's incredible is I can still remember as though it happened yesterday. I found myself floating on my back. I don't know if it's the early hours of the morning. There was no clock for me to look at, but I said night or the early hours of the morning. I found myself waking up in the hall, floating on my back, suspended, and being drawn. There was nothing around me. I was being pulled through the hall and through the glass of the kitchen door that led into the kitchen, and then being dragged on my back through the kitchen door, through to the conservatory and out into the garden. And all along my mind screaming that I'm fully conscious, I'm fully awake, I'm aware of what's going on, but I can't move. Now, while this is happening, as I'm being pulled out into the garden and my body's arcing around, so I'm now outside. And if I can just paint a picture of outside, we had a huge patio and a massive pond, a very long back garden with an aviary. And I'm looking up at the sky, and there are hundreds of UFOs that are moving through the sky. And I remembered feeling, oh my God, they're real. They're actually real. They exist. And then all of a sudden I felt a whoosh, like being taken up in the air very quickly. And one of these crafts that I wasn't moving, that I knew to be a disc-shaped craft, came into view, and then there was a blank. And then, of course, the next episode that happened was even more terrifying, because I found myself waking up. I was confused. I didn't know where I was. It was very hot in this room, and I'd been laid out on this, what I assumed to be some type of medical bed. Now, the room wasn't bright. It was darkish, but I could still see around me. And when I tried to move, my arms and my legs are being strapped to this bed, and I'm on my back, so I'm looking up. It was very hot. It felt like mist in there. And the horror started when I found, and this is where also that I spent many years being scarred by this, that I found that there was a foreign implement that had been placed in the lower part of the anatomy. And where it had been placed in the lower part of the anatomy, within the lower stomach region, it felt organic. The sheer horror of this made me started to scream. And when I turned to my right, There were three, sounds stupid, there were three what I thought were reptilians that were in this fog that were moving backwards and forwards in this strange stance, and I was screaming and yelling for them to take this thing out of me. The only way I can explain it was that I felt like I had been robbed of my dignity and respect. And now, every time I go back there, it still brings that memory back. Now, pulling myself together to carry on with the story, after this intrusion, the small, I would say it was more cream than grey, appeared out from nowhere, I suppose, down the room. I couldn't judge how big the room is because it was quite foggy. And the next thing I knew was that the implement was being removed and that I was ordered to dress. And the empathy that I felt from this being was such that it had taken me away from this very intrusive experimentation, whatever was happening. So I dressed, and it ordered me to follow it to the end of the craft, which I assumed was a wall. And when I came to the wall, I could see these lights along the top that seemed to be coming through the ceiling or something, and the door disappeared, and I could see outside of the village to the village. So I knew that we were up a height, and this being told me that I had to exit, and I started to get upset because I'm not good with heights. It wanted me to exit, and I'm thinking, well, how do I get out of here? Well, I was ordered to just move forward, and there were another two greys that I was not to look at, that brought me down to the ground. And as I'm coming down to the ground, this is where we're near the end of the story, this is where it gets really bizarre, there was another saucer, and it was hanging over our conservatory. And as I was coming down to the ground, ordered not to look at these two greys, and as I touched the ground, there was this other grey being in front of me. Now, he is the one that I was very interested in, because when I looked at him, I felt the air of my solar plexus being punched, because he looked so angry with me. He stood there in a one-piece khaki uniform. He had knee-length boots on, knee-high boots on. His arms were folded in a threatening stance, and he wore this stupid pointed hat on his head. But his features were like a grey, but they were a little bit more human. But the look on his face was of intense anger. And I could feel this from the air of what I now know to be the solar plexus. So I'm thinking, how dare you? I'm thinking in my head, what the hell is going on here? And he just was looking at me real angry, and I felt like I knew him from somewhere, but I couldn't explain where. Now, I tried to collect my thoughts together, thinking this has really happened to me. I need something. I need some form of evidence to prove categorically that I have been taken, that I was on this object, they'd done something to me. So I thought, how on earth am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? You see, because I thought if I could hang on to the most normal connection on a conscious level, I knew that if he'd tell me, I'd be able to tell people what had happened to me. Well, as soon as I asked him this, he looked shocked. His eyes, and his mouth went into an O, and as he started to rasp, it came out electronically. I felt what I thought was my body going crashing back through the conservatory glass doors, through the kitchen, then through the other kitchen door to the other end of the hall, through the hall, and I banged into my body. As soon as I woke up, I had a nosebleed, and I did have physical marks afterwards.
Okay, so you've just said you banged into your body.
Yes.
So actually, it's not your body that's actually moving out. Correct. It is like astral.
Correct. And this is what led me into the exploration and area, this obsession to discover what the abduction phenomena really means, and that's why I've kind of like drawn parallels to the Greys being able to extract the real essence of us from our temples, from our bodies.
See, Philip, this is what I've always believed. I've always believed it's not actually our bodies that they actually take.
No, that's correct.
It is the astral part of us, the part that can astral travel.
Exactly, and when that is brought into the correct frequency.
But how they put that astral part of us into a deep coma type sleep, I don't know. But obviously it doesn't work for you. And I think that's why you had this connection with the reptile taking you through the craft itself. Because he more than likely was quite amazed that you were able to be awake and experience everything.
Yes.
Plus, this little one.
Let me interject a little bit here,
Mark. I've just got to say this.
Okay.
Right? This one that he saw when he landed in front of the conservatory, got no fashion sense whatsoever. That would be the first thing that I would have said to him. Not how did you do it. I would have said, man, you've got it all wrong.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask a question then, because I understand what you're trying to say, Irene. I'm not exactly sure I 100% agree, although I do believe that a lot of these... I
don't believe they take you solidly. Mind you...
But then keep in mind that there are a lot...
Keeping in mind when my old man floated up in the air and fell down on the floor.
Well, that doesn't mean it was the aliens.
No, it doesn't.
No. No, what I was going to say was, there are so many reports from people who are abducted or go through these experiences where, and even from what Philip was just now saying, he physically felt violated as they were inserting things in him, and in a lot of times when they insert in things in that matter, it's they're doing electrostimulation because they're collecting semen. They're collecting, and from women they collect
so
ova.
It's said, or they think. Yeah.
Well, there is.
It's not actually been proven, is it? But that's what a lot of
aliens
people
themselves
think
haven't been proven. There's if you go by the evidence, the anecdotal evidence of people reporting everything from the Betty and Barney Hill, Jim Sparks case, or Stan Romanek, everybody that have had these kind of dealings, have had genetic material taken, and it seems like these beings are very interested in our genetics. In fact,
and more so maybe with Philip, because he's actually a twin.
Well,
and he's very psychic.
Now, Philip, has other than that experience that you had with your brother Ron, where he was like put into a trance, has he ever had any of his own experiences?
Yes, he had one when he was 13 in Luton, when we'd come back from, we hadn't long been back from South Africa, because we lived out there for 18 months in Vanderbijl Park, which is 50 miles outside of Johannesburg. And he had an experience that he recounted and will never forget with what he called the doctors. Our experiences were very different. The room that he was taken into, the hospital, was very different to the room that I was in. And indeed, he said that the humanoids were clad from head to foot in clothing, so he couldn't see them, but he felt that the person behind him was a male, because when he'd had his experience of being taken through the room and through the ceiling into this object, he was shocked to discover that the male behind him that he couldn't see knew his name. So I believe that that's the only one. I mean, my brother and I have seen UFOs many times. The recent ones was in 2016 that thankfully had been filmed by my niece, and also another person's come forward with some photographic evidence of the same things on the same night. So that's going to be put in my new book. But it seems that the experiences that Ronald had was a lot more kinder than the one that I had, and I think and feel that because of that experience that I had, I've been on this mission to find out what the abduction phenomenon means. I think there are different ways that certain greys are able to do this. One, soul extraction, two, physically. But at the same token, it does come with a level of high strangeness that we can't really piece together. But I do know that there is an enormous psychic link with this. I'm not talking about clairvoyance. I'm talking about the soul. I'm talking about continuation. I'm talking about memory. And I don't doubt, Mark, that they are collecting samples, because in another part of my thesis that I'll be working on, sounds posh, doesn't it, thesis, but it does to have everything to do with the genetic makeup of what we are, and as a species, as a human species, where we have gone wrong. And I feel that, in most of the aspects of the research, although I've looked at it negatively, there is a part of me that's trying to understand that, what these beings are doing may be for the benefit of our species in the long run, or they're trying to save or salvage or create a new genus of man.
Well, I've heard those theories. There's also theories in that they may have created us to begin with.
That is possible.
And so this genetic manipulation, and with the hybrids that people have claimed to have seen and interacted with, a lot of times people who theorize on this, I think they fall short because they go, oh, well, maybe their planet is dying out and they're doing a hybrid race in order to repopulate, or all these like wild ideas that with no basis in fact. And yet these things, based on a lot of the witness testimony, have been very involved with us genetically, possibly since our inception, beginning of time. I've always thought that we as humans were so different from every other life form on this planet, and that, I feel like we are a hybrid species. And it would help to explain why we seem to have so many medical problems too. Things like teeth that we don't need, appendixes or organs that we don't really need, and they're there for we don't know why. Things like that, through people could say, well, because of evolution. Well, that's one, but I think that we've been genetically manipulated, especially considering how fast humans from different species seem to pop up and exist at the same time in the fossil record.
Yes, I mean, it's within the halls of possibility that they are our guardians, that they are our creators. I will never dispute theories. I think it's important to try to analyze and look at all aspects of this phenomena. I can only speak from experience. To begin with, I was like a wild animal. Back in 1989, I mean, we're talking about 30 years ago, and the memory is still as fresh and as raw as it was, like it had happened yesterday. Have I learnt anything from that? Well, I think I have. And I feel also that it does take time for anyone that's in a traumatic situation to not only overcome it, but understand it. So I had physical marks left after the experience. I had 3 red triangular indentations in the back of my right ear. I have 3 marks on my right arm that burns, sometimes for no apparent reason. Yes, embarrassingly, I found it hard to walk for a while. And I also suffered intense nosebleeds to the right nostril, to the extent where they were going to cauterize the nose, but they didn't in the end. Now, I feel very strongly that you're correct. When I was coming back from Arizona, quite a number of years, about 3 years ago now, I think it's about 3 years ago, after a UFO conference there, when I was coming back, I remembered I was sitting on the plane and looking up at where the luggage compartments are and where you can put stuff on the top, not in the actual things that you open. And this memory, I don't know what it was, or a memory, and it was telling me that the Greys are far older, much older. And I know people have said this, but this is confirmation for myself that they're much older than we know. So in terms of genetic manipulation, I don't doubt that one bit. And the other thing that it's done, and it's very bizarre and happens to most other so-called abductees, I think I tried to fight it. I think I tried to deny the fact that it happened. But of course, when mainstream media, I like the way you said about how mainstream media deals with this, and I totally agree. When a certain program got hold of this, and I had gone with full intentions, good intentions, they had tried to destroy my whole credibility. I've dealt with that now because of the probing and the small remarks that were made. They cut it and they dealt with it. So it made me look like I was stupid, bonkers, liar, all these types of things. So I do know how the media works. We all do now. I think most of us have an idea. But the main emphasis of my understanding is that it gives you this kind of like worldview, not just about the aliens as we call them, but about us as a race. And I've discovered more and more lately that as a species, because the Greys obviously operate on a one mind hive consciousness level of consciousness where they all integrate and connect as one mind, that this is what's dividing us as a species, because we are not of one mind, that we are potentially dangerous creatures because a lot of people don't tell you how they're thinking or they're feeling and what their intentions are. And if we look at the world as it stands today, this divide has never ended. There is always bloodshed. So I think the Greys could be trying to, in some way, redesign the human genome, the species, and evolving it into something new. So, I believe that they may even be like Moses with the ark, with where he took all of the animals on the ark and saving what could be saved before who knows what happens, or we destroy ourselves.
No,
and also, yeah. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, you said Moses. So when you said Ark, I thought Ark of the Covenant. It's my Indiana Jones geek out coming out there.
That's okay. No, the Ark of the Covenant is another very interesting aspect, and I'm very fascinated with that. And I think there's a lot behind that. But in terms of the Ark, or us on the Earth, is that the Greys may be building their own Ark and trying to evolve us or redesign us. Because as a species, where are we going? In fact, we're finding more differences with one another. We're becoming more colder, more aggressive. And that's not going to help us. People aren't allowed to evolve. They're not allowed to express themselves. It's all controlled. It's all contained. And I do believe, as I've said before, that there is another darker element to this that is involved. And I know people say it's all conspiracy theorists, but the conspiracy theorist is only a psychological weapon to turn the finger of doubt upon the inquiring mind. But with regards to the corruption and the disruption and the lies, I mean, that obviously tells me that there is a very strong negative influence that's also controlling the planet in some way. So I can't state that the Greys are bad. We have rogue humans. We have good humans. They might have rogue Greys. They have good Greys. So it stands to reason.
Well, let me ask, with you only remember those two experiences. And how far apart were those experiences?
Well, if we think about it, my brother was 13. I mean, I remembered him telling me about that. He was horrified by it. But of course, in those days, there was hardly anyone to go to. There wasn't certainly the networks we have today. And even if they were, you couldn't really get to them because, you were a kid and you had to write to people and wait weeks or months for something to come through. So he was 13. And of course, we had the same experience together with our grandmother in the garden with the silver orb. That's been said about before. And I was 20. In 1989, I was 20 years of age. So I'm nearly 50. I'll be 50 in a month and a bit's time. So I still remembered the event as though it happened yesterday. And that's the other thing that's really bizarre. But nothing's ever changed with the experience. Nothing's ever changed there. But I've changed. I feel like I've changed within myself, within a kind of like a deeper understanding of what other people have been talking about. Because people say, oh, I've been abducted. Well, I wanted to know what the abduction meant. I wanted to know what it felt like in order to try and create parallels to see if it matched mine. Now, some people, you're quite right, Mark, and they do get abducted physically, and some people get abducted in the most unusual of ways. So the Greys are able to manipulate matter and time. They're also masters at reading our minds, consciousness. So, they obviously know a lot more about us than we ourselves.
Now, remember those experiences, but have you ever attempted to do hypnotic regression to try to find out if you've had other experiences?
There may have been two other experiences. I had a chap who tried to help me unlock the memory. Now, what's interesting is that he was a qualified hypnotherapist, a decent man. He didn't deal with abduction phenomena or regression in terms of dealing with people who've been involved in UFO abductions, but he did try to help me unlock a memory. Now, we failed. It wouldn't happen. I guess I'm just too strong to be hypnotized or to be regressed. But there was another very interesting element to all of this that I will go back to childhood. And I have to relay this because this is very interesting. We used to live on the property of Bignell House, which then belonged to a Dr. Thomas Gregory and his wife Marge. Bignell House is in Oxfordshire, and it's a mansion. And I know that Twiggy owned it once. Now, my mother and my stepfather and me and Ronnie lived within the servants' quarters of the cottage, which is a huge building. The property itself, Bignell House, was built by the descendants of Sir Francis Drake. It boasted trout stream, a very big wood, a swimming pool, a tennis court. It was beautiful, and we were allowed to use facilities on the property. Now, what's interesting is that in my later years, I kept having this reoccurring dream, and in this reoccurring dream, there were these huge rocks that were all spread out in a circle, and in the middle of the circle was this derelict building. But while I'm in this dream and it's flowing through, this is a repeated dream, and it kept happening, I have to find the keys, the stones of the keys, in order to get me to the middle of this building. It was so important to the point where I needed to find how to get there. Now, this carried on and on, this same dream, for many years, until the last time when I just lay down, had a little nap, and then the dream was playing out. But as the dream was playing out, as it always did, the same way, I was awake but couldn't open my eyes. When the dream had finished, I woke up, I drew this down on a piece of paper, and I said to my mum, I said, can you tell me what this is? And she said, oh, yes. She said, I know exactly what that is. She said, I used to take you there all the time. It was on the property of Bignell House. So I believe that, I can't prove it, but I believe that something happened there, and perhaps that this encryption within the mind is some kind of block, because when I was having the repeated dream, I knew that once I'd cracked it open, I'd remember, but I couldn't. So, that is another puzzle, but someone did try to regress me unsuccessfully, and we did try that as well, because that was another element that I wanted him to unlock, because I thought that if he could unlock that, it might unlock the memory of what had happened. I don't know, but the attempt failed.
Philip, have you ever thought about going back to Bignell House, to where that feature is?
Well, we did try many, many years ago, but when you're encroaching on a massive property and you're driving down the windy drive, you kind of get edgy because it's ostensibly trespassing, but no, that was the only time, and I did really want to have a look. But I do know that the swimming pool has been covered over now. That's not there anymore. But it's interesting, isn't it, that the place was haunted. It had a lot of history to it. And our family all know that it was haunted, and a lot of strange things happened. Some other strange things happened to me there. But obviously, you don't want to sound like a geek or someone that's a sensationalist by describing all these things that happened. I mainly focus upon the major things that happened that have led me towards this, interest in psychic phenomena and UFOs. And as I said to people, I'm not really interested in my case anymore. I'm more interested in the process. But it's interesting to go over the strange occurrences of those things that happened. Indeed, I think a lot of people have strange things happen to them, some more profound than others. But when I look back, there have been, between me and my brother and my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, a lot of strange things that happened to us. And, you have to be careful, because once you start, getting your work out there, or becoming noticed, as it were, not that I'm a sensational seeker by any means of the word, or egotistical. I couldn't be any more black and white than what my grandfather was, my mum's dad. But you have to be careful, because people then start to attack you and, saying, oh, you're crazy. I mean, I know that Whitley Strieber, through Communion, we had a letter from him many years ago. We belonged to the Communion network that he had running with his wife, and then we belonged to the Communion network, and we had all these letters from all these different people who claimed all these contacts from different people. It was wonderful listening to their stories, some a little bit dubious, others quite strange. And I know that he went through an enormous, absolutely enormous ridicule. But you know what? always believed in Whitley. I always believed in his experiences, because when I saw him being interviewed on Wogan, and I remember the audience laughing, I wasn't laughing because I was looking at the man and thinking, I believe that you've had this. And then what comes out? Oh, you've had the experience because you've read Communion. Most people that looked at the cover of the original cover of his Communion book were shocked, because the entity, Ishtar, as he called her, was familiar to a lot of people, and it seems to resonate with the past, which is incredible. So I have the utmost respect for Whitley Strieber, and I know that he's lost his beloved wife, and I'm very sorry about that. But I know you guys had him on your radio program not long ago, and that was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. He is a nice fella.
And
he's a lovely man.
I followed Whitley for years, ever since Communion came out, and I finally read it, and I read his subsequent books, nonfiction books on what happened with him. He go through a lot of ridicule, and so many abductees who do come forward deal with so much ridicule and accusations of faking and hoaxing, and it seems to be, the mission of so many people to disprove anyone who comes forward with a claim that they have had an experience. And even when there's an overwhelming amount of evidence they've had an experience, all it takes is for one little thing for somebody to go, aha, see, they're faking it, and, just totally discredits them. And people have had their lives destroyed because of this, because you want to tell the truth, but then you're fighting not only those elements of society that want to keep it quiet and don't want anybody talking about this, but the media itself, which is an accomplice to it. I feel we are just one big societal conditioning experiment, that it's constant brainwashing, constant tweaking of trying to tell people how to think, what's ridiculous and what's acceptable. And as we see in this modern age, how we're dealing with this huge shift on what is acceptable to talk about and what isn't. And it's all this conditioning with the media as well. So, people for so many years, they get on there, and my friend Bruce Pearson always used to call it the snicker factor, where where people would just laugh. They always the reporters say everything tongue in cheek, and and don't take it seriously, or winking to the camera, or playing X-Files theme song music and.
But I have to tell you, the other interesting part is that the death sold survival. And I had gone to see a medium when my grandmother had passed over, and this medium, Pearl, she used to work for the FBI in America. She was flown over there to work on cold soul cases. Now, she read for me for 2 hours, and she brought the most incredible evidence through to me that I could not disprove, and some future things that have happened. Now, she said to me that you're going to be a medium, and I thought, oh no, here's the man that's interested in UFOs and studying them, and now he talks to the dead. I thought my reputation would go right down the pan. But understanding discarnate communication, understanding the process of how consciousness works to a degree. I'm no expert. I am a layman. But I've spent a lot of time trying to understand how communication is achieved, which proved one thing, that, talking to the dead, they exist on a higher frequency of awareness that our senses can't always attune to. And the same with the UFO phenomena, which seems to play with us, or it seems to operate on a principle of, totally blowing away our science that we are currently aware of. So I kind of tried to make the parallels between this interdimensional hypothesis. Of course, when we are brought into the Greys' presence, however we're brought into that field of awareness, we can interact with them and they can interact with us. The same with someone who passes to the other side. The experience is as real to them as them being here on Earth. So it's very interesting to see that these alternative dimensional frequencies are around us.
Well, going back to you mentioning Whitley Strieber, one of the things that he talked about very early on, and it's a subject that I struggled with for a while, and I finally came around accepting it, is the idea that these beings, and I hate to use the term aliens because people automatically think, bug-eyed monsters from Zeta Reticuli, but yeah, they seem to be very much involved with us on a spiritual level too. And Whitley had mentioned in several of his encountering people who had died, who were dead. And that he seemed to feel like the visitors that he was dealing with, he I think at one point he called them shepherds of the souls. And so they seem to be working with us not just on a physical level, but on a spiritual level. Now, also looking at Dr. John Mack's work with his books Abductions and Passport to the Cosmos. And he had mentioned, in a lot of the hypnotic regressions that he did of experiencers, so many of them reported actually coming into this life, living past lives as these creatures, or being these creatures on a non-corporeal level, and then choosing to come into human form and living a human lifetime with a mission or secret of having these experiences and helping out in some way. Now, when they're living as normal people, they don't remember any of this. It's only when it comes out under hypnosis.
So that answers who I am, then, doesn't it, Mark?
Well, you're just weird. You're batty.
We're all weird. Do you know, I love it, but I will tell you that the medium did say to me she picked up on the UFOs. She didn't know me from Adam. She picked up on the UFO experience that happened, and she actually said to me something that shocked me, and I have put this in one of my books. She said, would it surprise you to know that you were once a grey? Now, at that point, going back all those years, and with the limited information that I had at that time, I kind of didn't know how to take that. But understanding as we grow and we evolve and we learn more, we develop more, and through very honest and truthful people, not just from yourselves, but other researchers and explorers into this phenomena, it kind of makes sense, because it is to do with the soul. As I've said continuously before, it is to do with our continual existence beyond this physical matrix. And I absolutely agree that what the Greys are doing is more than just spacemen coming to just have a prod at us. There is something much more deeper and more profound, and it does link on a very spiritual, dare I use that word, level or soul level. So I did, when I was in that plane coming back from Arizona, know instantly that they were much older than ourselves. And I don't know, sometimes you get a feeling that creates the words necessary to try and explain what you want to say, but sometimes it doesn't always come out that way. So sure, I mean, as I said, I haven't restricted myself just into the hypothetical model of cloned souls, which I brought out. That was part of the puzzle. Lately, I've been able to try and build other parts to that puzzle to bridge it together. I'm not saying that I'm right. I may be barking up the wrong tree, but I think it's important for other, researchers to come forward with what they understand. Now, when I met Dr. David Jacobs in Arizona, we had a good long chat, me and him. He's a lovely man. He believes that they are being developed to take over the world or to integrate within our society. I don't dispute that, but I felt that there had to be something more involved with that. And I will tell you, there was a young lass there, and please forgive me, I can't remember her name. She was at the school in Zimbabwe. She had a friend with her, and they had seen these two greys, and she then started to, later in life, download and start to become an artist and bring out all this amazing information. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name offhand. She was a lovely lass. I met her as well and listened to her talk. Now, what's happened with her is that she feels that the Greys were also there to help. because although the experience for her, I think she was about 7 at the time, was to her terrifying, she now realizes that she seems to be some kind of key that's beginning to slowly unlock. And I know that she's got a team of experts that have analyzed her drawings, because she's an artist of greys and lions, and there are symbols in them that are linked, with a language that is almost forgotten. So it's interesting how these experiences are very multi-dimensional with different people who've had these experiences. It's really incredible, isn't it, when you think about that, how they affect us individually.
Philip, you said that they're able to be coming down, or they could be coming down here to integrate with us, take over. How would you feel about that?
It really wouldn't bother me, because at the moment, the way I see the world is that it might do a ton load of good. A lot of the way that I feel this, and I'm not human, but the way that I see the world, and especially with the media, which can be a good thing and a bad thing. The way I see the world at the moment, maybe it's because I'm sensitive, I'm more frightened of it. It frightens me. It frightens me to think that people are becoming less tolerable of others. People are becoming more aggressive and more opinionated. And this is the thing, because what I'm still trying to get my head round is that, the subject of life after death, and also the penultimate, the UFO phenomena, and all these years, decades later, we are still being told by the higher establishments that they do not exist. And even when they don't say anything, they say nothing. And it's left to us people, a lot of really brilliant, good people like yourselves, to try and sort the wheat from the chaff, to try and find the truth. And as I've always said, my main cause in all of this is for the truth. I would swear to you on God's oath, everything that I have spoken about in all the years that I've been involved in, I have not once embellished, I've not once added or subtracted anything from the experience. But still to this day, I'm boggled. But I'm more scared for us as a human species because of the way that we're going, politically, environmentally. I mean, it's absolutely shocking. And one of the things that I think that both of you have said very rightfully to begin with shows like the paranormal shows, I totally agree with you, because I also have heard from some personalities who had been involved with the media circus, how their lives had been destroyed by the media machine through these said psychic clairvoyant shows. So I am also, I can't mention names and I won't, but I am also very much aware of how the media machine operate and the way they try to program the minds of millions of people that they believe are just sheep.
Oh yeah, it's all about control, and that in itself is a whole nother show. Because I could rant on that for days. I mean, it's with this phenomenon itself. You mentioned Dave Jacobs, and I've heard many of his old interviews he used to do with Art Bell on Coast to Coast. Lately, you can go and find the archives on the Paranormal Radio app, which we also broadcast on. We stream on, so if you download it for free,
we do.
Download it for free, and you'll find Paranormal UK Radio. But they also have some old Art Bell archives on there, and I've heard several interviews with Dr. Jacobs. He always took a very negative look at the aliens, as they're not here for our benefit, and they could be exploiting us, and that could very well be true. I mean, it seems like we are dealing with multiple races. In fact, you had mentioned already that you had seen not only what looked like greys, or we term as greys, but a reptilian type of creature as well.
Yes,
I mean, how many different types of creatures have you personally seen? Is it just the two, or is there more?
No, from what I can recount through memory, there was only the 3 reptilians. There was the cream type grey on board the craft, and there was the noddy type. I call him Noddy. He's not anything like Noddy, but if you can watch animated plastic moving, that would horrify you. And he was the other one. And there was another reptilian that I saw when I was having healing by a lady called Maureen. But that was more, it appeared in front of me. And Ronald knows all about that. And of course, he based his book, The Archons, on the connection of that. But the one that I saw when I was being healed, he wore a black uniform with an emblem on his left side. I can't remember what the emblem read or what it had on it, if it was writing or if it was just a jewel or something. But he seemed kind of like friendly. I didn't feel threatened by him. I remember telling Maureen, and I have to tell you, she's a lovely lady. But you know, you tell someone something and they'll accept and embrace everything and then tell you what they think it is. But they were the only ones that I recall. I've been told before, oh no, you've probably had more abductions. Maybe that's the case, but I can't remember it. The only other time that I remembered where something may have happened was that time goes so fast, I didn't record it. Could be 10 years ago, could be 8 years ago, but I woke up in bed to the sound of rumbling over the house. My bladder was bursting. I went to the loo, which we all do, and when I looked in the mirror, my T-shirt, my North American Indian T-shirt, was back to front, which is kind of like an impossibility because the back is higher than the front, which means that it's very uncomfortable. So it did register that perhaps something may have happened then, but I don't add or embellish upon the experience. That may have been another time. But I have seen a lot of photographs. I mean, that people have sent me that I can't really disclose because I'm waiting to see if I can have permission to use them, of these so-called greys, but more in terms of their appearance. So they're the only ones that I remembered. But the thing is, if you go to have regression, am I scared of it? Maybe there was a part of me that didn't want that. Maybe there was a part of me that didn't want to deal with that because, I know there are some good people out there, but I don't want someone messing around with my mind and making me say things that aren't real. Do you understand? I want someone that can do it, that's able to do it as it happened, because without suggestibility, that's what I mean. Yeah.
There's one story I always get a chuckle over, and he's a controversial figure, but there's Stan Romanek and his stories, and whatever people may think of him these days, there's one story he told, and when I last spoke with him, he gave me a little more information on it, but he mentioned in one of his books that he had an abduction experience, and he was wearing a T-shirt when he was abducted, but when he was brought back, he was wearing a woman's nightgown, a nightshirt. So he was wondering what in the hell happened. They switched clothes and on him, but then what made it even more funny was that his T-shirt said, he had a T-shirt that said, "I was abducted by aliens and all I got was this lousy T-shirt."
Can you imagine her waking up in bed wearing that?
Yeah. Now, that was the story he recounted in his book, which is hysterical. But the other element to it is we found out much later on who it was. Turns out it was Betty Hill.
Oh my Lord! Yes, good Lord.
She's got the T-shirt then.
I don't know if she does. I do know the nightshirt that he found in talking with I think Betty's niece Kathleen Marsden, that was hers nightgown. So I don't know if she had the shirt, if that came up, but that's whose nightshirt that he had.
That's very interesting. I mean, well, I certainly didn't have any women's night clothes on. I would have been very worried had that been the case, and I wouldn't have been thinking of abductions, and I thought I would have well and truly flipped. But you hear these stories of these things happening. As I said, I can't prove that anything happened. I don't recall anything happening, only the sound of rumbling over the house and my bladder bursting and going and finding that my T-shirt about 3 o'clock in the morning was was back to front. So unless I, unconsciously got out of it and then turned myself back round and put it back on again, I've got no idea. But with regards to the research and the greys, they have fascinated me. And I know someone said to me once, are you obsessed with them? And I said, no, I'm obsessed with finding the truth. But the more that you go into this, the multi-complex it becomes, because a lot of researchers have their own opinions. And as I've said before, I respect all of those opinions because nothing can be proven. But we can actually try to build some form of an idea through, similarities between different people. I know, speaking to Terry Lovelace, author of Incident at Devil's Den, that his experience had been extremely traumatic for him and for his family. And then you get other people who have stated that their experiences were very enlightening, that they had very enlightening experiences with these beings. So I think it depends, but I did make someone laugh when they said that, when you had your abduction, do you feel that you were mishandled? And I said, well, let's put it this way. If you go in for an operation, and they knock you out, I said, they're not going to just treat you lightly, are they? You hear these stories of how they have to do and perform their experiments. And when I was on that so-called craft, because it felt to me like a craft, it was certainly up in the air, did I wake up? It's like my brother, Ronald, at 13, when he was in the wheelchair, woke up after going through the house and into this object and being pushed in this wheelchair, and a male behind him, and the other, all of them being clad in these, these heavy clothing, so he couldn't see their faces. But he had the feeling that he'd woken up, and they were surprised that he'd awoken. You have these reports that other people, when the greys are lifting someone up out of the house, one such case I remembered from someone I spoke to not long ago, was that the person woke up, that the greys were abducting, and the greys were puzzled because when he woke up, they couldn't get him through the ceiling. So, I mean, there seems to be some irony to this. Either the greys aren't able to fully knock someone out, or they obviously have their own problems sometimes in getting you to where they need to get you. So it's good to have a sense of humor with it. I think, you just end up crying if you didn't. So it would appear that the greys themselves do also have a sense of humor. I mean, maybe we view it that way, I don't know, but certainly something to ponder over.
You can just imagine them swearing, trying to get someone through the ceiling, can't you?
But you know what's interesting? I mean, taking the subject matter slightly away from that, in terms of the interdimensional hypothesis, it is interesting because I know that we all know that CERN now want to build a bigger Hadron Accelerator. Yeah. And mine and Ronald's argument is that, well, not so much as arguing, but, bashing thoughts together, like you and Irene and Mark, both of you together, is that they must have discovered something and they need a more powerful object to do it. So I'm convinced that they discovered something but need more power. And as I said before, the likes of us, the sheeple, as the system calls us, will never be privy to the real information of what's going on. The same with the secret industrial complex, a military complex. They won't tell you what's really going on because this is proven fact since the early 1940s, when the cover-up was initially orchestrated through the Roswell, New Mexico incident. And I absolutely damn well know that happened because of the amount of literature and information and evidence, well, so-called witness testimonies come forward. A lot of it seems to add up.
Roswell is kind of. I'm not saying I'm having problems with the Roswell story. I guess I'm having problems with an event that is so overhyped.
Oh, yes.
And they focus so much on Roswell. It's Roswell this and Roswell that. That
it's like Rendlesham here. It's like Rendlesham here. The same thing
it's
here.
been analyzed to death to the point where it's gone into myth and legend, and very little in terms of fact, compared to the same thing you could start to say surrounds the Rendlesham case there in the UK. It's the one big event that people talk about in the UK, and yet so many people talk about it ad nauseum that it starts taking on a life of its own. You have people who claim they were there that probably weren't there, and I don't know. I kind of shy away from some of those cases and start looking at some of the more obscure cases that not a lot of people.
I mean,
when you hear them all the time, they grind on you.
Yeah, I mean, with Rendlesham, we done our research, and as you know, I brought a book out that co-authored with Brenda Butler called Sky Crash Throughout Time, a continued investigation to the Rendlesham UFO mystery, and that was to do with the past UFO sightings that had occurred and the experiences. Now, what's interesting, I agree with you, both of you, on there, that the people only want to know about the main event itself. But in 1998, I think it was, we had done an experiment in there that was all logged in there and catalogued of performing an experiment that seemed to work. But it's not like you want people to know about it, because the event was so fantastic. You wanted to tell people, and I tried to do that, to say, look, we've done this experiment. No one wanted to know. And I kind of got suspicious that certain elements of the UFO phenomena or certain cases are continuously highlighted over and over again. I totally agree with both of you, Irene and Mark, on this, because it does get tiresome. But at the same token, when you look at the other things that have happened, I remember that there was a guy called David Daniels that Brenda Butler had got involved with, and he was not human. And this had been witnessed by many people, including a high-ranking lord within the House of Lords.
I think I remember this. Carry on.
Yes, yeah.
Carry on.
His name was David Daniels, and that he was able to transform himself into a reptilian. He scared a lot of people. He could read minds. And I did a lot of ground research with the people that had been involved with him. And let me tell you, when you meet these people and they are talking to you and explaining to you what this reptilian stroke human was, you sit there and you feel the chills going. And these people were very down to earth. So it's all about when you go and meet the people, when you speak to them face to face, when you know what you're looking for. And one of the guys that I interviewed, let me tell you, he's black and white. I mean, and he told me categorically, Philip, that man was not human. I know that he disappeared from the scene and he was set up for a murder that they couldn't find. I really suspect that the Scotland Yard wanted him, which they did. And I think because he also went to go and see Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens, he went to go and see Jenny Randalls, he went to go and see a lot of the prominent ufologists. And I am absolutely convinced, that Brenda may laugh at this, but I'm sure that my brother, myself, and Susan met him before I knew Brenda. And she's saying that's an impossibility, but I'm saying it's not, because we had made a trip to Rendlesham Forest long before I got involved with Brenda, long before I got involved with the research with that book, and long before I knew the lovely Peter Robbins. But we had gone on an excursion, a group thing with BEAMS, the British Earth and Aero Mystery Society, that was created by Kenneth John Parsons. And we'd all gone in a minibus to Rendlesham, and we stopped off at this pub because we were going to do a bit of skywatch, and we didn't see much of anything, I'm afraid. But anyway, we stopped in this pub, and they were all going to get some grub. And this man came over, and he'd been watching me, Ronnie, and Susan. And I'm just telling you that when I think about this now, and I know it happened. It did happen. Sorry, I don't mean that. I mean, I know what I'm saying. I believe that guy was David Daniels, because he was very weird. He kept following us, asking us lots of questions. He seemed to be poking around in your mind. And Ronald and Susan said that he saw, I can't remember if his right or left arm changed to plastic. It really frightened them. This guy wouldn't leave us alone. And that's all we heard in the minibus going all the way back. This man called Joseph, I believe he called himself, Joseph. And he wanted to come in the forest with us, which he did. And he opened up this car and he said, I think I've got a pair of boots in there. And there was one pair of boots in the back. I'm not saying that we met the reptilian, but I'm going to say to you that strange things happen in life and I don't make things fit. But I can tell you that's always been in the back of my mind. I know that other people would say, oh, no, you couldn't have met him. But no, why couldn't we? I mean, you know, he outwitted the police. He just disappeared. In fact, he started to appear in Australia, this David Daniels, and was the talk of most of the UFO community. Very bizarre person. But I believe that he wasn't human. And he wasn't interested in the Rensham UFO case when he went up with Brenda Butler at all. He didn't know nothing about it. He was more interested in us as a species and wrote and then maps. And the layout of he did the layout. I remembered seeing these maps he'd done for Brenda, the energy centres of the forest, the Rendlesham forest, because Brenda had asked him. But that was another very strange case. So it's possible that I could have met a real extraterrestrial in human form. You know, and Ronald and Susan are still adamant that that's what happened, because Susan used to come with us into the forest, and we did a lot of experiments there.
I'm getting muddled up with the names here. Now, David Daniels. He called
David
himself
Daniels
Joseph.
That's right. Yes, that's right. Yeah, and he was Brenda. They all knew him as David Daniels, and the man that we met called himself Joseph. And the description of Joseph seems to match David Daniels. I can't prove that, but I'm going to put my neck on the line and say I reckon that was him, because that happened before we met Brenda. And, you know, who's to say he's an alien? My goodness, you know, if he can outwit the police, if he can get away with stuff, and he can suddenly appear in front of people, like he did with Dot Street, who was the co-author of the Sky Crash, A Cosmic Conspiracy, the first book that was brought out on the Rendlesham UFO case back in 1983, I think that came out, 84, 83.
Yeah. Okay. And he appeared sometimes as a reptilian, or?
Yes, I mean, he stayed with Brenda on her property in this old caravan, and he never washed, but he was clean. And he ate lots of sweets he said, to energize himself. But they'd gone out one day and found that the caravan itself was red hot, like burning, and they don't know what was going on in there. And there's a whole host of many things that have been documented and recorded about that guy. And I got a little bit unnerved. Brenda and I did put 3 or 4 chapters of it in Sky Crash throughout time, and I know that John Hanson had also put some parts in one of his UFO books about that. They'd met with a prominent lord, and when Brenda had gone in to meet this lord with David Daniels, Brenda Butler had been checked, but he hadn't. And the Lord himself was talking to David Daniels as though he understood him, because David Daniels was saying about his culture, his world, they needed help. And the good Lord said, well, I can't help you. I'm close to retiring. My career will be in ruins. So what Brenda couldn't believe was that these two guys were talking as though the Lord knew exactly what was going on. So, you know, that's bizarre in itself. So these things happen to people, and sometimes you have to take a step back and think, did that really happen? And sometimes you're like, it's like the time when I went to the doctors and they were looking in my right ear, and I had problems with it. And the doctor went to go and get another doctor and a nurse, and they were all poking and having a look in there. And I thought, well, what are they looking at? And they said, well, it hasn't healed. There's some crystalline structure in there, and in the right ear, by the way. And when they left, the lady knows I'm a medium, and she just said to me afterwards when they left it, have you been abducted by aliens, Philip? Well, I went back to the car worse than when I came in. They just left it. They didn't bother with it. And so I thought, well, that's very strange. If there's a foreign implement in your ear and there's something strange, surely you want to get it checked out. I had someone just recently saying to me, well, you know, didn't you get it explored? Didn't you get looked at? Well, no. On a personal level, I don't want that. I feel that whatever it is, if there is anything there, it's done me more good. I keep feeling that if they take it out, I won't be able to communicate with the dead anymore. I won't be able to have a connection with the UFOs. Shall I tell you about the sighting we had in 2016?
Yeah, go on.
Because that's very bizarre. In 2016, on the 9th of April, at precisely 11:15, we'd seen these 3 huge white disc-shaped objects hovering over our house. Now, what happened is that we'd been out to some friends for an early birthday meal. I hadn't drunk anything because I'm driving. I refuse to drink and drive. Anyway, it's a bit difficult when everyone else is enjoying themselves and you can't have a drink. Anyway, my sister, my niece rock up separately to these friends in Copel, which is a small village, a couple of miles outside from Kempston. And my sister and my niece drive back. Now, they live in Marston Mortain and one in Lower Shelton. And then I say to Ronnie, right, come on, Ronnie, let's go back. It's time to go. So it's a clear night and stars were out. It was cold. 9th of April, this was 2016. And it's around about 11 o'clock. We didn't see the UFOs until around about 11:15. I remembered that clock that time. But on the way back down through the village and coming onto the bypass and then coming off, we could see these 3 lights in the distance. And I thought, first of all, they were workmen's lanterns. And as I drove nearer and nearer to them, I come onto Cow Bridge and I stopped the car. I literally stopped the car. And I'm saying to Ronald, and he can see them, and I say, oh my God, what are those? So that feeling is starting to generate inside me, thinking, oh my God, that's not normal. Now, when I drive home, which is just not far down the road, and I park up, the 3 discs are in the shape of a triangular formation. They are hovering directly above us. I'm getting out of the car with my brother. And what's really bizarre is that there's no one else walking down the street. Now, my man bag that I had is buzzing, which means that someone's trying to contact me on my mobile phone. I'm not going to reach in to get my phone because if I want to take that phone out, someone will distract me from what I'm looking at. So Ronald and I are looking at the 3 objects. They're in a triangular formation, and the one to the side of it comes forward to it silently, then goes back. Then they move into a straight position, so they're in a line, and you can measure the distance between each object. It's absolutely symmetrical, and they move off. Well, anyway, we were standing there watching them for about 5 minutes when they configured into this new way, and I get in, the phone's ringing again. It's Charlie, my niece, and first thing I said to her is, are you phoning about the UFOs? And she said, have you seen them? And I said, Charlie, they've just been over our house. And she said, well, she got out of her car when she was coming to Marston, and they came overhead. They were so big. She got her phone out, and she got an image of them. And I know that Jason Gleaves has put them on YouTube, and he's analysed them, and they're unknown. Now, what's interesting is that when she'd taken the picture, she downloaded it onto the computer and couldn't find it. She did find it recently, and then we got it out. Now, I did a reading for a guy who came over not long ago, and after I'd finished the reading, he said, I've got something to tell you. And I said, what do you want to tell me? And he said, those 3 objects that you've seen, he said, I've got photographs of them. I said, you're joking me, right? He said, no. And he's brought the photographs for me to have, which I have here, along with some letters from the Ministry of Defence about another encounter he was involved in. Now, what's interesting, that was on the 9th of April 2016 at precisely 11:15 at night. There was no one walking their dog or coming out the pub, down the road, no one, nothing. Now, the next day, the very next day...
Was there a silence?
It was weird. It was like... I know that Jerry Mandels has coined the Oz factor. Yeah, it was weird. And I've spoken to some other people that have said these things happen where other people are with you and they can't see them. So the very next day, on the 10th of April, slightly earlier time, I'd say roughly about maybe 8, 9 o'clock. I can't remember, but I remembered it certainly wasn't 11 o'clock. A helicopter comes over our house, and it's not a black helicopter. It looks like a white helicopter. And I'm inside, and I'm hearing this ruckus. So I go outside, and I call Ronnie down, my twin, and we're out in the back garden. And would you believe what this helicopter is doing? It is circling around our house with the cockpit facing us, slightly bent down so the pilots can see us. And it's going round, and it's going round. And I said to Ronald, what on earth is that helicopter doing? Well, the third or fourth rotation of its complete circle around the house that it went off. And you know, that little bit of my dark mind thought something really awful. Someone phones up that saw this. Oh, yeah. I'd like to make a report, please, about the 3 objects I saw. Oh, you must be talking about the helicopter, because you know a lot of people don't document things. You must be talking about the helicopter. Oh, that's right. It was a helicopter, wasn't it? I was convinced that those 3 UFOs would make the headlines in the local newspapers. There was nothing. Absolutely nothing. But we're so pleased that we've got these 2 pieces of documentation, which not proves that we're lying, that doesn't state that what we're saying isn't true. But thank God for the documentation, because when you're trying to tell people the truth and you're telling them things, they sometimes look at you. And then when you present the evidence, there is some form of respect, at least, that these things are happening and have been happening. So I know that...
And the good thing is there was another witness.
Yes, absolutely, totally. And he was a very sincere man, and I could have kissed his feet, because I thought, oh, my Lord, thank you so much. I said, can I use this in my new UFO book? He said, you have my permission to use it. So that's going to go in, that story, that experience is going to go into You, the Public Deceived, the Grand UFO Deception, later when I start working on that this year. I'm still working on a Guardians of the Dead at the moment. I'm kind of like halfway through that, so it's getting there. But you see, it's weird, and it's funny, because I was talking to another researcher, and he said the same thing. He said, you know, there's some people who you can have a UFO sighting and only 2 will see it and 5 won't. And I said, why is that? And he said, well, I don't know. It's very bizarre, isn't it? But I know that the British ufologist Jenny Randalls, that I have the greatest respect for, coined it the Oz factor, where these objects or these entities are able to distort both space and time around you.
Mm.
There's also a lot of accounts where they are able to affect people's memories with screen memories or false memories of an event. People may think they remember an event happening in one way, and then again, when it comes out under hypnosis, they're shocked to realize something completely different, or there was a lot more detail than they previously remembered. There's a lot of encounters where people discuss screen memories of seeing owls. Mike Cleland has a whole book called The Messengers, which is about the owl phenomenon. And of course, that fits in with owls and the big eyes, and aliens and the big eyes. It's a screen memory to help people, I guess, not remember the traumatic event. And another thing I want your thoughts on this is, a lot of times experiencers, they're given information by these aliens or these creatures. They're passed a lot of information, whether it's about the environment, how we're hurting the environment, or that they need to do this or that, or even like Betty Hill when she was shown the star map on the craft. Sometimes we got to take a big step back, because it's been proven in some cases that these things can and do lie.
Absolutely.
So just because something comes up and tries to tell you something doesn't mean it's telling you the truth.
No, absolutely. And I totally concur, because I have actually stated this in A Passage to Eternity, The Enigma of the Dead, UFOs and Aliens, that sometimes our space visitors don't always tell us the truth. It's like they mislead us. It's almost as if they want a reaction from you, as though they're gaining an understanding of these very raw and deep emotions that they're stimulating within the individual. Now, I wasn't shown any world catastrophe. I wasn't told anything. In fact, I've got to say here, excuse my French, bugger all. I mean, the only thing that I had was an intrusive investigation, and then having to deal with this rather cocky and self-assured noddy type grey that I wanted to punch right between the eyes. But thinking about it, after all these years, did they give me anything? I don't know. The feeling is that I feel more compassionate for good people. I feel more compassion for the world. I'm not saying that I'm out there in a robe and sandals, and preaching all this, and I'm not. It's just the way that my mind works. And I think that going back to what Pearl, the psychic medium, said to me all those years ago, to bridge the gap between the psychic and UFO phenomena. And of course, I got a book published, the publishers brought out, called Believe, Bridging the Gap Between the Psychic and UFO Phenomena. I'm not saying that I've done that. We're all unique, we're all special, we're all important. But I think this obsession from me is to understand the essence of what we are as human beings, that we do have a soul, that life is not just a material existence only for consciousness to be snuffed out and our entire experience nullified. I don't buy that. I can't buy that, because there's a part of me saying, why have we been developed? For what reason? For what purpose? And then you have a greater understanding of the soul's journey beyond this realm, or the theoretical application of soul survival. I've had that experience. I've had that proof. So that tells me unconditionally that our journey does not end here. I always call it the awakening. I know that when we pass over to the other side, when the physical vehicle is exhausted and no longer needed for this journey, it's like an awakening, because consciousness in this form operates on a very low level of awareness. And sometimes some people's experiences where the memory may seep through the normal net of processing and overwhelms them. So sure, I believe that, we are multidimensional. I believe that these other entities, or these interdimensionals, or visitors, as Whitley Strieber calls them, are able to somehow access or tap into that part of us, which operates on slightly higher frequencies, but keeps us on a lower level while we're in material form. So it's kind of like a journey of discovery, and I really feel that. I feel that each and every one of us are looking for our own truths. And I always say to people, never let anyone change your belief system. That's a very dangerous thing to do. As long as that belief system doesn't destroy, control, or govern other people, what's the harm? I think all of us are walking this life in order to create, perhaps to elevate, to take us higher. I always say that maybe it's possible that there's a sense of humor to God, the all-powerful energy of consciousness of God, that it's created us for it to learn more about itself through an extension of us. And I believe that that could possibly be true, that when we pass over, all of the experiences, all of the things that were created, all of the art, the music, the beautiful things, the love, that this builds, and that we also go through the negative parts in order to try and create us as heroes. So, with every travesty, there is always a story. If everything was love and light, I think we get quite bored and complacent.
Well, we do need our challenges to grow.
Oh, yeah.
That's for certain. And, if those of us who do believe in a reincarnation, or, cycling of souls, yes, living many existences and lifetimes, we're here for that very purpose, is to learn from these experiences. And if everything was perfect all the time, it would be boring as whale crap.
We probably thought on the other side, look, they tell you, they say, look, if you go down to Earth, it's only for a couple of weeks. And we're stone drunk on the other side. We say, give me everything. Will it give me honors, full honors? Yeah, I'll give you full honors. We get down here and it's like, where am I? So you've got to have a sense of humor with this. I know I said that to someone, they were shocked. And I said, well, I do have a sense of humor. But interestingly, you've got to, Irene and Mark, you've got to have a sense of humor with this. But, one of the things is, on a personal, deep, rich level, it's about loss. It's about, for me, losing people that I've loved, and we all have been there. And I think also that this whole
What's happened?
Ronnie, did we lose you?
No, I'm still here. Are you there?
Yeah, you dropped out for a second. That was kind of odd.
Okay, sorry. I'm just saying that, with regards to the compassion, life after death, the meaning of life, the meaning of existence, the continuation. I think a lot of people, God loved them on this planet, are so confused by the consistent programming by the state, which doesn't give them any answers, that won't let the individual progress to what they would like to progress to. And I think this is the problem within the world. I think the world is being governed by fat cats. I think it's all coming out now. I think these people who are controllers, if you think about it, and I've really woken up to this, we are actually a slave race, because the system will tell you that in order to have some quality of life, you need to go and get a job. Now, my interest is within, this subject, and yours and Irene's as well. Is there anyone out there to pay you good money to get a good job to research this? No, there isn't. So you end up doing a job that you don't really want to do. And then when you go into that job, you find that within that working environment, there's another little hierarchy of things going on. So are people happy? No, I don't think a vast majority of the population are. Are they being stung by taxations? Of course they are. So you can see that the subjugation within our species is getting to the point where it's breaking, where it's going to explode. And a lot more people, I believe, are waking up to this big con that we have been had. And people say, well, how can we have it any other way? Well, any other way is liberation. Any other way is actually getting rid of this whole infrastructure that's controlling to the point where it's suffocating people. I'll give you an example, a good example. On television at the moment, there's lots of these things. Give money to Africa, let them have water. Sir Bob Geldof, back in the 1985 or whenever, did that big thing, okay? Where's all the money gone? And this tells you categorically that it's all about money, and the money does not go to where it's meant to be going. And I believe that there's enough food, there's enough water and clothing and material on this planet to make everyone comfortable. I'm not saying that it's the ideal way of going, but I believe that in the future what will happen is that when you're born, when you come into this world, there will be no money. We all know that. I believe then that you'll be tested on your abilities to see what you're good at, what interests you. Okay, there'll be some people who won't be interested in anything, and then I feel at that point that they'll bring out the best in you to utilize you into the area of what you want to research, you want to look into, and the person will enjoy what they're doing and feel passionate about contributing to that. But I'm talking about way off in the future, long after we've passed over.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I mean, I know right now the world where we are is nuts, and
it is with Brexit, I tell you.
Well, between over there you have the push for Brexit. Over here you have the left screaming for socialism, like that's going to save everybody. And I feel like we're just trading one form of enslavement for another. I've used this analogy many times. There's a great 80s B movie that nails it on the head, which is John Carpenter's They Live.
Oh, They Live. Yes, I love it. I've got it on Blu-ray. I absolutely love that. And I will tell you, the most horrifying film they ever brought out was The Thing. And I just think, oh my Lord, if that was on this planet, I'm getting off it. But with regards to John Carpenter's They Live, that was and if you look at that tells you a lot about what's been going on, where humanity's controlled by these extraterrestrials that feeding us and dumbing us down. And I love the idea of the people waking up. And there were some really cool effects in that film. So I really totally agree with you. That's one of my most favorite films with regards to what we're talking about in terms of the cover-up. And I do feel that I know that the British researcher here, David Icke, has always stated, he's always used that film as a template for what he's trying to tell the world in terms of his research. But I do agree that people have been conditioned. They're controlled through the media. And as I said, when I went on one of those programs, national programs here, I wasn't prepared. I was very naive. and they contacted me and said, you're a good speaker, because I was on Channel 4. They said, you come across really well. Would you like to come on our show? And I said, oh, that's very kind of you. Yes. What's it about? Oh, it's about UFOs and about the discussion of them. They didn't tell me what the program was called. And I said, well, who's going to be there? And they said, oh, there'll be Nick Pope, and there'll be Georgina Bruni, and Omar Fowler, and Malcolm Robinson. I'm great friends with Malcolm. And so I said, oh, sure, put me in. I was chauffeur-driven to the studio, and it was to be a live show. And I was taken into the green room. And one of the producers, Nicky Campbell, was in there. He was doing another program. And there were some other people, and I met the late but lovely Georgina Bruni and the wonderful Nick Pope. And I also met with Omar Fowler, and they showed me what would be under my name. So obviously I understood that they got this all worked out of how they wanted the show to go, because underneath my name, it said Philip Kinsella, and by it was Probed by Aliens. So I remembered, it said Probed by Aliens. So this is a live show. It was a big TV company. And so I called one of the producers over, and I said, I'm awfully sorry. I said, this is a little bit derogative, this statement here, Philip Kinsella probed by aliens. So this lady got all fussed and or a bit panicked, and then brought someone else over. And this Mr. Kinsella's not happy with this title. I said, well, look at it. Probed by aliens. What does that say? What does that tell you? Oh, yes, don't worry. Yeah, don't worry, they said. You'll laugh at this. Don't worry, we'll change it. I said, oh, lovely. Do you know, silly fool I am, I believe them. So we go on there, and Kay Adams is the presenter. I've got nothing against Kay Adams. I think she's a wonderful personality. She's just doing her job, and she was kind of bantering with me. She was doing her job. I'm not blaming Kay Adams. I have the utmost respect for her. She's a Scottish presenter. Nothing bad about her. She's a lovely lass, but she's just doing her job. Remember, they are controlled by the huge network. So they started to go into Nick Pope about him being abducted. I don't know what was going on, and I don't know if that really happened, but they just started to generalize.
I bet he didn't have a title like Probed by Aliens.
No, he did not. No, he didn't. But when they got onto me, and this scientist was telling me, you come here tonight with your mind and your thoughts. You haven't brought Dr. Spock's phaser or, an alien watch. And I was arguing, and I was saying, telling this scientist, excuse me, you have had proof. You've had a signal come through. And he stopped, and, but they kept going on about this Probed by Aliens bit. Kay Adams was going on about that. And as I said, again, I do love them.
What were they trying to do? Bring comedy to the programme?
Yes, they were. And the audience, and at that point, I remembered Omar Fowler turning to me and saying, Philip, we've been licked. And I said, well, I had no idea this programme was, and do you know what the programme was called? I need to backtrack because they didn't say what the programme was called. It was called X-Files or X-Fools. And I knew when I walked onto the studio where we stood with regards to that, because I felt my stomach dropping. No wonder Jenny Reynolds didn't turn up on the programme, because they would have had her licked as well. I'm telling you, I've learned so much from that experience. And when I was driving back,
what channel was that again?
That was on that was years ago. That was on, I think you can find the programme on Malcolm Robinson's got a link on his PSI page. It was Carlton, I think it was Carlton TV. And they did this series of like these programs. I went on this one, and this is when it all happened. This is when it all kicked off. We must be talking about when I was in my late 20s, I think, around about that time. It's quite some time ago now. But I did give up a fight on that program. And I will tell you, when I was chauffeur driven back, I felt so embarrassed because the chauffeur had seen the whole thing. I will tell you something very funny, though. Channel 4 did a series called For the Love Of. They did a lot of programs on strange things. But Ron Ron Johnson was the interviewer, a lovely guy. And I know he's gone on to write a lot of books, but he was interviewing all of us in a basement in London. It was so lovely. And he was listening to each of our experiences. I'd been invited on there. And Susan had come with me, my friend Susan, and she'd come to London with me. She was in a room waiting, and she was in the green room with these other people. And there was this Sir so-and-so, whoever was there. And this Sir so-and-so, before he came on for his programme, because they did it back to back, you see, like 2 hours one programme, 2 hours the next. So he's waiting to go on his programme, which was something different. And he was looking at the TV screen and he said, what's this programme about? I don't understand. And Susan said, well, she said it's about aliens. And he looked at me through the TV screen as being interviewed. And he said, yes, looks like an alien. Do you know what? I tell you, you meet some wonderful, cracking people in this business, I can tell you. But, oh, my Lord, that was just so funny. I laughed myself all the way to the Leeds, and I thought, what wonderful people. And you do have those moments. They were very kind to see. That was before the Carlton TV program came.
I remember Carlton TV.
Yes,
Philip, let's get something straight here. As far as you know, as far as we know, you've never been probed. I may have been probed a few times.
I can tell you something. I don't know how to answer that, but in the normal physical sense, no, I have not. But in the alien sense, yes, it was a rather rough ride. But as I said, it spent all these years trying to work out, and still trying to work out what happened. I don't think I'm any the wiser, but certainly when you've done your research and you found that other people, men especially, have gone through this experience. And I herald Whitley Strieber because he was a very brave man to come out to address this phenomena. I'm not saying that I'm the same as Whitley Strieber. He's a very prominent, very well-respected figurehead within the UFO community and also the film industry and his novels. But it's interesting to know that, the same thing happened to me, but under slightly different conditions.
Yeah.
Well, never having...
I thought we lost you then, Mark.
No, never having one of those experiences myself.
Oh, you don't know what you've missed.
Trust me, you're not going to miss much.
Although when I lived in California, there was this little store in Hollywood called the Pleasure Chest, and they had a lot of different items there for adults to use for that kind of thing. But I digress.
Yeah, so does Ann Summers over here.
They could have been testing out new toys for Ann Summers. I don't know. I've got no idea. I just maybe was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They obviously picked the wrong person. They got the wrong house.
Yeah.
Well, you know how when you mentioned earlier about seeing the lights and the UFOs, and you think that, oh my God, they'd be in the paper, somebody had mentioned it, and then you hear nothing.
Oh, yes.
Nothing. And a year ago I had a sighting here of something that I can't explain. I'm not ready to call it aliens or those types of UFOs. All I know, it was a big series of lights, about 20 of them, all flying in formation, flying right over my head silently. And I'm familiar with all types of aircraft. I couldn't tell what they were. And I only know one other person who saw them, besides my wife, who was with me at the time. And, they never made the news. Nobody ever said anything about it. And it's strange. It flew over a very busy section. We were driving on a road, and we were in a whole line of cars. And so you have to wonder if people see things like that and they just automatically dismiss it. We're just so trained to ignore things and blow it off. And very, very few people will actually go to the point of reporting it.
Yeah,
I know. Well, look, you look at me down here. I see so much up there in the sky over this valley. I don't take any notice of it anymore, the same way as I wouldn't take any notice if it was an airplane flying across in the daytime.
Yeah,
you just don't. You do get used to it.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, when there's something not right. It's the feeling you get because, as humans, we do have a defense mechanism that protects us, and I think fear comes into it. And I think once that fear comes in, it starts to generate something else to protect you. Now, what's interesting, how did you feel, if you don't mind me asking, Mark, when you saw them? How did you feel when you were looking at them?
Well, I knew right away that they were strange. They felt natural. For lack of a better description, and they didn't elicit any other kind of emotional response from me, but I just instantly knew that what I was looking at was weird. And I was the whole time I'm looking at it and trying to figure it out. My brain just wanted to figure it out, because they looked, I was trying to look at these lights and see what in the hell were they, because they were close to the ground. They were only about 400 or 500 feet away from me, at about 150 feet off of the ground, and flying in a very slow formation. If I had to guess, maybe 30, 40 miles an hour.
You didn't feel any fear or anything?
No, I wasn't.
You just felt curiosity.
Intense curiosity. I wanted to know what it was.
I sometimes wonder why. I remembered saying afterwards, when we saw the last one, the three lights in the 9th of April 2016, why? I'm looking up at them, and I'm like sending things out to them, but nothing's happening. Like, can you see us? Can you? And one of them moved to the other one, and they moved back silently, and then they aligned themselves into a straight line and moved off. And I said to Ronnie, why? Why are they doing that? Why? They're obviously aware that they're right above us. They were on their way. I'm not saying that they singled it out because we're special. That's they may have seen us and to show us themselves. But my question is why? They leave more questions than answers. And, you try and work it out, but it still doesn't make sense to me. We didn't have any missing time. There was no missing time whatsoever. But the whole experience was incredible, amazing. And I remembered saying, why? Why are you doing this? We've seen UFOs nearly all our lives, not every 5 minutes. There's gaps with 3 years, 3-year gaps, but why? Why are they doing this? What does this mean? I wanted to stand up and get contact. In fact, one time, one and I did just that, calling out to contact, and then you're told don't do it because you'll end up being probed again. But I'm sorry, I've got to have a sense of humour. Unless you've got a death wish or something. But, again, nothing happens. It's almost as if they're playing with you, they're toying with you. I don't know. It's just very bizarre. And I do get the feeling that I did get the feeling when I saw them that they weren't, going to harm us. I felt it was okay. I felt they wanted to demonstrate something, but I couldn't work out what it was. So still to this day, I'm just as puzzled and perplexed with regards to that sighting, that one.
And do you believe, Philip, that they do walk amongst us?
Yes, I do. I totally believe that. I believe, and I may sound a bit, crazy here, I believe that our dead visit us. I also believe that angels can walk among us and have done. Why should it be any different from biblical text? Everyone believes that, but now in modern times it's all got to be satanic. And also, I agree. And also I do. It wouldn't surprise me that they do walk among us. I mean, I've heard some stories from some people. I've met some very strange people. Are they alien? I couldn't prove that. It may be just their nature. But I do believe that some of them do walk among us. And I believe that, that is very possible. Why not? It always makes me feel like this is a big game. Life is a big game, and we've got to work it out. And I think that's very true. I think we've got to work out, and sometimes they may come along to help push you, because we always think of the Earth. We think this is it, and no one questions the bigger picture. Well, most people do, but a lot of the people, I mean, in society, they don't question their origins. They don't question where they come from, where they're going. Is their life after death? They don't question about the Big Bang or the universal creation. To me, it's like mental. I want to know these things. And maybe it's just not their time, God love them. Maybe it's not their time. But, my mind works in the way that you've had these experiences and it opens you up. It seems to make you aware, or a little bit more aware of the things that you're not being told and you want to find out.
Yeah. Very good way of putting it.
Yeah, I think we're all the same. I think you, Irene, and Mark, and all of us, we're after truth. And you get some people that come on, and talk to you and say, "Oh, I want proof." Well, if you put it in front of them, they still wouldn't believe it. I always say to people, if Christ came down in a ship, they would have killed him before he'd opened his mouth. I mean, it's true, isn't it?
Oh.
So, there's how they, within the religious sects, they believe there's a second coming. But, if that does happen, God help him, because, he'll be killed or destroyed before he even reached the ground, or before he opened his mouth, as I said, because not all believe
or even
space.
part of the television show where he's ridiculed.
Yes, that's right. So, it's going to take something monumental and more than that. I don't believe there's a second coming at all myself, personally. I believe that, we have to do the best that we can here. But I do believe that if there is another coming, it will be our visitors. I don't think it'll be a man. I believe it might be some extraterrestrial force that wants to make contact with us, or reveal all, or part of it anyway.
Well, I'm just hoping that that's what they do want. They don't want to come down here and eat us, that's all. I'll have to let my...
absolutely. I mean, that's like that old black and white film, To Serve Mankind, and of course they found out, we were all on the dinner menu for the aliens. But and Ronald, my brother Ronald, he's written a book called The Archons, which, if anyone's interested, I'll just say here that it's taken him 3 years to write this book, and it deals with reptilians. I can't give too much away, but they're not from this planet, and it does deal with a little bit of religion and a little bit of the demonic side. So that it's called The Archons. You can get that on Amazon, and then he was very excited about it, bless him, and he did say, can I mention that? And I said, and Irene and Mark, you both said, yes, you please mention it before I even asked. So he'll be chuffed with that. But it's called The Archons, and he's spent a lot of time working on that piece of fiction. And I said, well, you never know, Ronald. It may not be fiction. It could be fact. You don't know, do you?
You don't know. That's very, very true. Very true. But the artwork that he uses for his covers and everything are absolutely brilliant, aren't they?
Oh, I can get away with a lot. I can say, Ronald, could you do a big picture, please? Because I'm an artist, but not like him. I mean, I focus on my books. I mean, I used to do black and white illustrations, but he's like, he's very good with his work, and he can whip them up in about 4 or 5 hours. So, he's very good like that, and I'm very blessed. We're both very blessed to have kept working, like you both of you, on your gifts. It doesn't matter what it is, what it encompasses, even if it means making a good cake. That is an art in itself, and I can't make a good cake.
I'm afraid that's an art that I don't have.
Neither do I.
I burn water.
I'm good at eating cakes.
Yes, so am I. I love them. But I'm not a fruitcake. That's the main. I will tell you now, I'm not a fruitcake. I always say to people, they're horrified. I said, don't worry, in a few years' time you'll find me in a mental institute. And they look at me horrified. I said, I'm only joking.
Oh, dear. So, Mark?
Yes?
How much time have we got?
we're about at the end here. Yes, okay. we're here to the end. So, well, Philip, thank you very much for coming on. And just for anyone who came in late, we've been talking with Philip Kinsella, who is the author of A Passage Through Eternity: The Enigma of the Dead, UFOs, and Aliens. And now, Philip, where can people find your book?
They can find it on Amazon, because my brother and I lost our other 2 publishers, so get it on Amazon as ebook or paperback. And you can find me on website or www.philipkinsella.com, and Ronald's book, The Archons. That's also from Amazon. I think you'll love the cover of that one. Very demonic.
Yeah, beautiful.
Now, Philip, you also do a lot of appearances at conventions. Do you have any upcoming appearances you want to plug?
Yes, I'm at Pontecraft this year, which is a conference, and I'm doing a talk with some other UFO speakers, Calvin Parker, Malcolm Robertson, Paul Sinclair, and Chris Evers. And I'm also booked up for readings until late September. So I'm kind of busy within the week through that. And we'll be working on my new book, the UFO book, You, the Public Deceive, the Grandeur for Deception, later this year, while I'm getting Guardians of the Dead finished in the next 3 or 4 months. So hopefully that will be completed then.
Yeah, and also you and your brother,
Twin
Ronnie
Souls
Philip.
Radio.
Twin Souls Radio.
Courtesy of Irene and Mark and Mark Johnston. And we're very grateful to both of you because you've opened a window for both of us. And that is wonderful. And I know it's doing very well. The Paranormal Network's doing very well.
Yeah, and Paranormal UK Radio Network.
Yep.
Yes.
We absolutely love creating shows and show hosts. We do that. We do it all the time. We love it. We love it.
We love giving you all the platform to talk and bring your own perspectives to this because, you definitely have a very unique perspective on all this.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. And I really, really greatly appreciate coming back on your show again. I'm very delighted, very honoured indeed.
Well, that is the end. We've reached the end of the show, so I want to thank everybody for tuning in to another edition of Paranormal UK Radio here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And
how come you never mess that up? I mess it up all the time at the beginning.
Because I'm not you.
Oh. And we also have to thank Vitus 33 for listening.
Yes, and you can also hear us simulcast on XLR Radio as well. So, everyone, thank you very much and have a great evening.
Okay.
Thank you. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.